everybody. Welcome to GodThink TV. We're in season 2 talking all about intimacy. Specifically, intimacy with God.
Yeah.
Which is more important than any other kind of
Yeah.
intimacy. So, we are here with Pastor Bob, and we're here with a special guest, Stephen Ward.
Stephen's been a friend of ours for a few years here now, and has a wonderful ministry, wonderful family, and he's been a good friend to our church. Has come out and ministered out here on several occasions, and it's great. And visiting with Bishop Miller and travels with him quite a bit.
Leading the worship.
Yeah, great worship.
You should check out his worship.
Definitely.
If you're ready to have a party in your living room.
We actually want to get to know Stephen a little, and want you to get to know him a little, and that's really important to us. So I think the first thing we want to ask you is, we want to ask you about your current ministry and where you're at now and what's going on in your life.
I currently live in Greenville, South Carolina. It's a great city. It's actually like the number one fastest growing city right now, I think, in America for some reason.
Really?
Yeah. It's wild.
Wow.
But maybe it's because we're there. No.
Amen.
But we are there living. We've been there since 2008. Living there, and we served on a local ministry there for about 8 years.
Nice.
Now, since 2016, I should say, we've been on the road full time, me and my wife traveling.
Yeah.
And during that time of traveling, we launched this ministry that's called the Living Room.
Yeah.
And it's become like the Living Room movement. And then we also have an extension of that, which is the Living Room congregation, where people from all over gather on Friday nights and just go after the face of God. And just those that what we are going to talk about today, that want to be intimate with the Father. And so that's kind of what we are doing right now there in Greenville, South Carolina.
That's awesome. Well, and we want to talk a little bit about that, what that looks like, intimacy with God today. But actually, the first thing we want to do is talk to you about your walk of intimacy with God, because I believe that's really where all intimacy with God must generate out of. And so here we have a guest that we love, but we want to hear your walk and how that looked for you.
This is I grew up in a pastor's home. My dad is a preacher. My grandfather was a preacher. I'm getting ready to turn 40 years old, and I've been in this for a while. And on this journey, I really didn't have the encounter of the Father until I was about 17. Even though that I was active in the church up to that age, it was like I was living off the testimony of my dad. I was living off the testimony of my grandfather. I was worshiping a Jesus that they expressed to me, and really I didn't understand who he was to me. So at the age of 17, I was in a living room, and I put this VHS tape in. We didn't have DVDs then, and that's how long ago it was.
Hey, I remember those.
It was a couple of years ago, right?
A few years ago, it was those, them big old TVs that you slid the VHS tape in.
The big TVs in the back.
That's right. So I was sitting in this living room, and I was really at a crossroads of my life, because it had came to the place that I was continually ending up feeling empty. And this day I was just praying, and I was crying out to God, and I'm like, I need to know you.
Yeah.
And I put in this VHS tape, and it was a VHS tape of this revival that happened in Florida, the Brownsville revival. And the worship leader just started singing this song, "Holy Love, Flow in Me, Fill Me Up Like the Raging Sea." And when he said those phrases, something just came in the room. And now, looking back on it, it was just that manifest presence of God showed up. And I couldn't do anything but fall on the floor. And I laid on the floor, and it was probably when I really came to myself, back in that day, that revival went for hours on those nights. The pastor would preach, do altar call. The VHS tape had played all the way through. The TV was fuzzy. And that day when I got up, my life of the way that I saw Jesus was forever changed. And when I had that encounter, I got up and I said, God, I want to do everything in my power and with my life to create moments like that for people to experience.
Wow.
And because that was what changed the trajectory of my destiny. Because I was really a pastor's son that was wandering, not really knowing Jesus, but just being active with Jesus.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Wow.
I love that because it shows that enough is never really enough for him.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that you weren't saved, that you didn't believe,
Exactly.
Yeah.
which is, I think, the foundation, believing
Yes.
and getting saved. But he wanted more, and you wanted more, and he
Yes.
always wants more because he
Yes.
loves us that
Yes.
much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Wow. I don't know if this transmits across the camera to everybody out there, but as Stephen was talking, the presence of the Lord came down, and it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. And I know, and I just want to give honor to who honors due. And Stephen is a wonderful worshiper of God. And that's not just what he does, although he does lead and do all that as a great pastor and a worshiper. But it's interesting because our pastor, Pat, he has this funny saying. I love it. Whenever he goes to places, they ask him, well, who are you? And he doesn't like to introduce himself as pastor. He goes, because pastor's kind of a temporary job thing. It goes away in time. He says, I introduce myself as a worshiper.
As a worshiper.
And I, like I said, I don't know how it transmits.
That's
We're
right.
new at this.
Yeah.
I don't know how it transmits into you out there, but you can tell when you're around Stephen that he's a worshiper first. And that worshiping heart and spirit comes out of intimacy.
Yes.
It doesn't come any other way.
No.
And so how do you as a worshiper, in a busy life, I mean, you have a busy life,
Yes.
you have 3 kids,
Yes.
wife
Yes.
and lots of things going on,
Yes.
and you minister all over, and you have your church
Yes.
now. How do you
Anything
do
else?
that? Anything else? And a few other million things that he does.
Right.
And travel with Bishop.
And you
Right.
travel with Bishop, and probably writing
Yeah.
songs and
Yes.
doing all sorts of great stuff. And how do you keep that intimacy?
This is the thing, is that understanding that worship isn't something I do, like you said. And Pastor Pat always refers to himself. It's who I am. And understanding that Jesus or the Father said when he wrote in the scriptures, he said, I'm looking for those that will worship me in spirit and in truth. He didn't say he was looking for a singer. He said he was looking for a worshiper. And in the industry that I've been in for so long, we lose the moments when God shows up to really have that intimate time with him. And we want to continue to sing our song and not sing what he's wanting to hear. So that is where I feel like, even for me, how do I keep that intimacy is when he shows up, I have to abandon my preference and give him what he's desiring. And I feel like even the way where we are today is that the church has learned to be active with God, but not intimate with God.
Yeah.
And we substitute intimacy with activities. And we think because we're being active that we're being intimate.
Right.
And the thing is that the scripture says, I'm not sure what it was found, but right here, Matthew 7:22, 23, it said, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name?
Yeah.
And in your name did we not drive out demons? And in your name perform many miracles? Then it says that the Father responds, then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you.
Yeah.
The word knew there is intimacy.
Yes.
He said, you did all of this, but I did not know you. I was not intimate with you. So therefore he looks at him and says, depart from my presence. I never knew you.
Wow.
So I feel like that it's important for us as the church today to understand what it is to not just be active for God,
Yeah.
but to be intimate with him. And the intimacy comes from our secret place. It's not always the Sunday mornings and the Wednesday nights. That's, you know what I'm saying? That's
Yeah,
those are just an expression of our faith with our fellow believers. We come
Right.
together as a family and we worship together, you know, and build relationships and to hear
Yeah.
from the Father. And so that is the most crucial thing I feel like for us as worshipers, and for me, it's important that I continue to spend time with Him, more time with Him off the stage than I do with being on the stage.
Yeah.
And because I have found it easy to get lost in the activities
Yeah.
because I've done it so long,
Yeah.
and being busy. You know, we've used that. You know, being busy about the Father's work, doing things,
Right.
but we can't substitute the things for the intimacy.
Wow.
What
Well,
kind-
you know,
oh,
that's
go ahead.
interesting because you and I we're both married men, and so we know about that.
Exactly.
We know what that depart from me. I never knew you is all about. Of course, Brooke here someday. She's going
right.
to be, she's going to get that part too
That's right.
firsthand. But it's like, you know, I brought out the garbage for you. You know, I painted the house. I
Works.
did the deck.
That's right.
I did all the things,
I
you
did
know, and it's like your wife's like, that's nice. When's
that's
the
not-
last time we spent some
That's
time
right.
together?
To get to know each other.
Yeah, yeah, and that is like you can do all the other stuff
Yes.
perfect and lose there. Go ahead,
That's
single
it.
lady.
And that, you said that about
Yeah.
a husband and wife.
Yeah,
It's
so
like
I
the Bible
actually
says
had-
about knowing your husband and wife according to knowledge.
Right.
And knowledge there is another.
It's the
is
same
Intimate
word.
intimacy.
word.
Yeah.
I was thinking when you were talking, maybe for people who aren't married,
Yeah.
we don't know these things, but you know, like let's say for example, somebody that you went to school with ended up being Justin Bieber, you know, years
Yes.
later, but you just was like, oh hey Justin, like in the locker room or whatever, and then he becomes famous, and you're like, Justin, my man,
man.
what's up? Woo, when we gonna hang out?
Yeah.
And he's like,
I don't know you.
Yeah. And it's
What
like,
was your
but,
name?
It's like, but we went, remember? We used to like, our lockers right next to each other. And he's like, but I didn't know you.
Yeah.
And it's a similar thing because, I mean, obviously God is much bigger than Justin Bieber. No offense, Justin Bieber, but you are still welcome here
exactly.
anytime.
This is the thing, and just by the reference, intimacy can never be looked at as sexual.
Right.
That's not intimacy.
Right.
Because that is just a response of another expression. So the thing is that we have to learn what it is to really commune with the Father.
Right.
Yeah.
Not only talk to Him, but allow Him to talk to us.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and that for me, there's no other greater place than in prayer and worship.
Right.
You know, and being able to commune with Him and allow Him to talk to me, because that's where I find revelation.
So what does that practically look like? Because we understand from the list Bob gave us, you're very busy.
Yes.
And so on a really practical, I mean, I'm just trying to be real. What does it look like? Does it look like waking up at 4 a.m. so that way you have that time? Or, you know, and what does that time look like?
I would refer to the scripture says to pray without ceasing, because it's prayer and worship really go hand in hand. They're, you know, a lot of times we just express it different, the way that we approach the Father through prayer or through worship. But so this is the thing is I really go through the day. I'm not just trying to sound super spiritual. I'm very mindful that the Father could want to talk to me at any time. And I'm very mindful at trying to communicate to Him when I'm driving down the road by myself, or when I'm whatever, if I'm walking outside by myself. I'm continually, you know, I'm continuing that conversation, you know, and that's another thing is like the church as far as a whole has been okay with one word and not carrying on a conversation.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like if Abraham would have only went off the one word, he would have killed his promise.
Right. Yeah.
You know, he would have killed Isaac. But when he got to the mountain, he was continuing to listen to the Father.
Right.
Yeah.
And the next word
Yeah.
came and
Yeah.
said, "Don't take his life." So
Very
the thing,
good.
you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, yeah.
we go through life not receiving that revelation because we don't receive words from what the Father is saying out of His presence. Moses went to the top of the mountain, had an encounter with the Father. And that's where the 10 Commandments were written.
Right.
On that day, those 10 Commandments was revelation to Moses.
Yeah.
When he came down off the mountain and presented it to the people, it was rules and regulation.
Right.
Because they didn't hear it out of the presence of God.
Right.
They were never positioned in that position to understand that they were intimate with him or had the availability to be intimate with him. But Moses did. So here we have a bunch of people that have a lot of information,
Which is a lot harder to follow.
Yeah, do's and
respect,
don'ts.
and yeah.
And it doesn't become revelation. Worship for me opens up a whole nother avenue that when I worship him and I hear his voice, you're not going to talk me out of it.
Right.
It's a revelation. It's a rhema word that has came to me. You know what I'm saying? And that's what is crucial. My heart burns for churches that want to automatically take out the presence-driven side of the services and not allow the Father to be present. You know what I'm saying?
He just went there.
So
He went there,
So
yeah.
this that's the challenge to me because we have great preachers. But the thing is you're teaching people and they're receiving it on ears of do's and don'ts. If I do this, I will get that. If I don't do this, I won't get that. You know what I'm saying? And it doesn't become revelation. And then what we see is we end up with frustrated Christians. Well, this ain't working for me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because it hasn't become a rhema word to them. It hasn't become revelation. So I feel like that worship and being in his presence and then allowing that presence, you know, if you were looking at our church service structure, we do praise and worship, God shows up, the pastor comes up and drops the word. You know what I'm saying? We have prepared ourselves to receive that
Right.
as a revelation, because then the revelation, then it becomes like an activation to us, and we can be active on what we've heard and been taught out of the presence of God. So that's the reason I love worship. I love the word. Don't get me wrong. I love preaching. I've been around it all my life.
Yeah.
But even in the scriptures, the children of Israel gathered around the presence of God. They didn't gather around a preacher. They didn't gather around none of that. They were because they knew if they got in the presence of God, they would hear his voice.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.